it's been a very busy afternoon of breaking news today. We want to begin with our team in the center of those protests in downtown Grand Rapids tonight. Leon Hendricks looking at how police are doing things differently from Saturday night. But let's start with Heather Walker, who has been standing and talking with some of the protesters this afternoon. Heather.
Hey, Brian. Yeah, there's a lot of conversation, well, I should say one-sided conversation happening with the protesters. We're 3 hours into this protest, which has remained peaceful so far. Just behind me, a man is now addressing the crowd, but there are dozens of people that are out here now standing face to face with the National Guard, which has created a wall between the protesters and GRPD along with the police department. This crowd says they are not going to leave. They are waiting for some kind of sign of solidarity from law enforcement. They've asked them to take a knee with this group. They've asked them to walk with this group. And then Chief Payne came out here. He stuck his head out and he came onto the street and the crowd yelled for him. He is the first black man to be the police chief of the Grand Rapids Police Department. And he came down and he did speak to the crowd briefly. Here's a little bit of what he said.
What I asked them to do is to work with me. Black lives do matter, and what is important is that the safety of everyone in this community is what I'm here to try to make sure everyone feels safe and are safe. The other point I'd like to make is that that's my #1 priority, but the damage that was done on Saturday is not acceptable. And we will use our resources to make sure, #1, everyone is safe in this community, but damage cannot happen like it happened Saturday night. So resources will be used for that also. And I would like to remind everyone we still have a 7 p.m. curfew. And everyone should be aware of that. It went very well, and I'm thanking everyone in Grand Rapids who abided by that curfew. It was put in place because we have to maintain some order, and that curfew is still in effect this afternoon. Something else I want to also say, law enforcement, this is 2020. We have to make sure we're accountable for our actions and things, and we will hold each other accountable. The tragedy that occurred in Minnesota, those officers are being held accountable. So I think we have to make sure we're doing our part also. And it was very important that they were held accountable. That's a tragedy. It should never have happened.
Chief, the protesters keep asking you to walk with them. Why aren't you doing that?
I'd be willing to walk with them. This is an unpermitted demonstration. If they wanted to organize and we can sit and talk about that, how that can be done, I'd be the first. I'd lead the pack. And I'm willing to do that. In fact, we've had no one contacted us about this event this afternoon. We tried to reach out. I put my cell phone number out there for people, and I was never contacted. Now, Wednesday, there's a scheduled rally that's going on. I've had conversations with those organizers. I plan to be there, and I will be a part of that. But this is not organized. In fact, I'll go so far as to say I don't believe a lot of people down there are from Grand Rapids.
And that was Chief Payne speaking at a press conference that was held about 30 minutes ago. But he did also come down here and speak to the crowd, but he did not cross the line of law enforcement, which the crowd was asking him to do. They were asking him to walk with them, to, just do something in solidarity with him. He said, not today. And that was not enough for these protesters who are staying out here. Of course, the curfew starts at 7 o'clock, so we'll have to see what happens then. But for now, everything has remained peaceful. There's been 0 arrests. Even though there is a large law enforcement presence, we saw people literally by the busload come in from state police to surrounding counties, and of course the National Guard. There is a line of Humvees out here keeping protesters away from the Grand Rapids Police Department to try to prevent what happened on Saturday night. We're going to stay out here live, and we'll keep you posted as to what happens.
All right, Heather. Heather, it seems like the protesters are somewhat hemmed in into that particular area. Is that a fair assessment? Are they just congregating in that particular area?
We do have crews throughout the downtown area, and we are told this is the only area where there are protesters. So yes, they are all gathering here. Because if you remember, this all started because of a protest on Facebook that was advertised to start at 3 o'clock at Van Andel Arena. And police already got ahead of that, and they put out a message saying, do not come and gather there. You do not have a permit to gather. So instead, protesters actually gathered on the sidewalk here right by Grand Rapids Brewing Company. And they were peaceful to start with, about 5 people, and now it's turned into this, dozens of people.
All right, Heather Walker monitoring that situation downtown for us tonight. Heather, thank you for that. News 8's Leon Hendricks also continuing our live team coverage with a dramatic difference in how authorities are responding to tonight's protest. Leon.
Brian, good evening to you. Yes, a significant difference. It almost seemed that protest on Saturday, that police were trying to keep their presence as inconspicuous as possible, trying to keep that hidden away and not incite anything more significant from the crowd. It's clear they're making that a totally different position today, as there is a significant show of force here. We are behind the police line where you see members of the National Guard as well as the police. We just saw them actually do a changing of the guard of the officers who are standing out here. You see officers on bike, and then you got this row here of Humvees. Now, this isn't the only area where you see this kind of presence in downtown Grand Rapids. Now, the protesters are indeed here at Ionia and Fulton, but if you come downtown, you are sure to see this presence of law enforcement way before you see any protesters. We've seen them about town boarding up some businesses and some buildings in downtown as a preventative measure to see that they don't get damaged. So they're out here and they're prepared. Talked to a number of law enforcement sources after what happened over the weekend, and the common thing I heard from all of them is we were way too far outnumbered. Way too far outnumbered. They said there was no way that they could really get a handle on the crowd that gathered on Saturday night and prevent a lot of the damage that we saw happen. So they're making sure that's not the case as best they can. The National Guard is here, backed by police officers, and right now what we're seeing is the National Guard standing between the police line and the protesters. And right now you're looking at the crowd yelling, "Hands up, don't shoot," a mantra that we've heard repeatedly as protesters gather and speak their mind as it connects to what happened in Minnesota. And that's what's happening here. But we see a crowd here. It's nothing like the crowd that initially gathered for what was a peaceful protest in Grand Rapids on Saturday. But there is a crowd here, no doubt, and a crowd that the police promise they will disperse when the curfew goes into effect at 7 o'clock. We're live downtown. Leon Hendricks, News 8.